one mistake is to say, I don't know anything about negotiation, but once I read this book, suddenly the book will enlighten me and I'll get better. And I'll just receive manna from heaven and I'll be wonderful. I think a good negotiation coach is someone that can capture and take what somebody already knows and turns it into something which is practical and useful.
Welcome to the Tech Society podcast. Today we have Andrew Wei Min Lee with us, an expert when it comes to Asian and Australian business strategy. He gives us some valuable tips on breaking into Asian markets and the personal touch required when networking with others. He also shares his thoughts on how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the way we treat our fellow humans.
Hello.
John and Alex, hello, sirs.
Hi, Andrew. How's it going? Thank you for
Very
joining
good.
us.
I cannot tell you how excited I have been, how much I've been looking forward to this. And the number one reason is that after speaking with Lan, I spent some time on your website, which I understand is undergoing a refresh.
Yes,
but I have been burning to tell you and ask you why that coffee counter is stuck at zero. I mean, about 7,000 by now.
I love how you just started with that.
Yeah.
Well, Alex can talk about this one. I think.
Let's get to the important things first.
Alex.
So essentially the coffee counter is I would say it's like a test we give new programmers. So they come in and they rewrite our coffee counter and they create a new coffee bot. And the last person to do it was actually a work experience kid. How old was he, John? Like 14? He was pretty young. And then unfortunately, because we work from home, he built that on a Raspberry Pi sitting in the office.
Yeah. So we can't communicate with it from here.
Can't communicate with it.
Right.
So we have actually created a new coffee bot, but because of the new website coming, they're not talking yet. So in about a week, it'll suddenly go right up there to, I think
if you're curious though, I am at 1,400.
All right. So here's the thing. So that may cause some friction, John, because I actually don't drink coffee. My wife is born in China. So I'm born in Adelaide, Australia, as you may know. My wife's born in China. My wife's family is connected to the tea industry of China. So her uncle in particular is one of these super hotshot, Shifu senseis that he's the one that grades tea. So he's the one that says this tea is worth 50,000 renminbi a cup, and this tea you can use to clean the toilet.
Is that like wine tasters, but for tea?
Yeah, wine tasters. Yeah. So this is a Penfolds Grange bin XYZ, and this is vinegar.
So I love how much research you did on us. That was I was really impressed. I don't think no one else has ever done anything like that. So
I mean, one of the things, and I suppose on a professional level, you ask what is important for Australian executives, particularly in the tech industry, to know when they're engaging, when they want to negotiate with Asia. And I think one of the key things is developing that personal touch. I think Australians are absolutely fantastic and frankly better than our Asian counterparts when it comes to developing preparing for the business side of things. We've got our stats and our Excel spreadsheets and our PowerPoint presentations. We're very, very professional in that way. What I think we could work on more is, I guess we call it soft skills here, right? And
yes,
sometimes I think that diminishes how important it is, because look, these days the tech industry is huge. It's also a highly competitive industry. And if you're going to be meeting, 100 people at a conference, if you're going to be sending off hundreds of emails, how are you going to stand out? And I mean, I was even thinking for Ninja Software, you would say something along the lines of, where Ninja Software, if you have a product or a service, then we tailor-make software for you to reach your customers and clients better. And for example, some of the things that we've done, we enable Chinese buyers of beef to verify that their meat comes from an organic Australian farm.
You really have done your research.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's important, right? Or taxi drivers to anonymously and securely and quickly communicate with to raise security issues. And I think if and I thank you, Alex. Look, many of us, you've done a lot of interviews already. I don't think many interviewees have done as much reading on Latitude 28 and Genesis, on Crime Stoppers, or I love your Frog Ponds platform. The fact that I've done that, and I'm blatantly showing that in a very sort of over-the-top way right now, but that makes me stand out, right? And
absolutely,
that's how you want. That's how Australian tech people just doing something like that. You would have stood out to a Singaporean investor or a Korean partner, or a Japanese client. So that's a key point.
Mm. An interesting point I had in a meeting recently is someone was trying to do a lot of business in Asia. I think it was in Singapore, and as an Australian, he was struggling to get traction in Asia until he found some advice. The advice was read Sun Tzu's Art of War and apply it. And he read it, and suddenly it all made sense.
That doesn't make sense.
He never explained to me how that made
Sun
sense.
Tzu's Art of War for business, the interpretation, or did he read the original text?
I'm pretty sure it was the original, and it informed him, and suddenly it all made sense. How to connect with the Asian style of business, and it's different to Australia. So Andrew, if you can go into what really makes it, what are we missing from Australia to be able to connect with Asian countries?
And can I interject really quickly there? That seems antagonistic to me, whereas business, from my perspective, is actually more about relationships.
But how we do business,
make love, not war, right?
But how we do business is informed by society, right? And ultimately, we're so close to Asia, but we're still a Western society. And I may not look Western, but I am very Australian. So you have to approach it differently. And I think it's not explored enough. So maybe Andrew, if you could talk a bit about what we're missing in terms of connections with Asian businesses.
Although I think that's the follow-on. I'd love for you to give us your thoughts on the Art of War, or at least John's friend actually applying that to business in Asia, which I find a little bit confusing.
Let's find
Sure.
out.
So the first is you asked about The Art of War and how that is a book which was very useful to your friend who was negotiating and doing business in Singapore. I think taking a step, using that as a cue and taking a step back, I think there is a lot of information and advice out there on negotiation and doing business in place X. If you go to Google right now and type negotiation in Singapore, negotiation in India, or negotiating with China, you'll get 5 million hits. And Art of War is, and there's a couple of classic books and things that come up. Art of War is one. Getting to Yes is another one that often comes up. And I think all of these are useful. And another thing is that if you look at business schools and government schools and law schools, that everybody's delivering a course on negotiation, on business leadership, on doing business better with things, right? So there's no shortage of advice on negotiation. And my take on it is there is a lot of very, very good advice. There is a lot of very well researched theory. What I think is critical, though, is to recognize that if someone is listening to this podcast and is watching this webinar, they've already had a lot of experience with negotiation, and they're either already experienced or are interested in negotiating with Asian counterparts. So I think one mistake is to say, I don't know anything about negotiation, but once I read this book, suddenly the book will enlighten me and I'll get better. And I'll just receive manna from heaven and I'll be wonderful. I think a good negotiation coach is someone that can capture and take what somebody already knows and turns it into something which is practical and useful. What I suspect your friend did after reading Getting to Yes is he or she already had the knowledge, the experience embedded inside him. I'm just going to assume it's a male for now. And this book crystallized a lot of ideas for him. Any negotiation advice must be practical and essentially codify the common sense which is already inside you. Because if you're asking someone to completely change what they've been doing for the past 10 years, if you're asking someone in a highly emotional, difficult, deadline is tomorrow negotiation to adopt 17 new strategies, that's not going to work. And I don't think that's what the book did for your friend. What the book did for your friend was he knew that if I'm going to engage with someone from Singapore, I need to tweak the way that I do things, the way that I'm used to doing things in Australia. And I need to tweak them in a couple of different ways. I don't quite know how to do that, but after reading this book, oh, okay, I should use that example, or I should use that thing that I did with Mary, or, that thing I learned with John and Alex, I should do that. And that's what the book did. So I think negotiation training, negotiation texts, negotiation books should really be about drawing upon the strengths and experiences that already exist within us and applying them in a very practical and easy to use way. Anything more becomes a wonderful, and anything more complicated becomes a wonderful PhD thesis, but it's actually very, very difficult to apply in reality.
So in the spirit of that, any hot tips for people you're struggling to negotiate in Singapore, Hong Kong, China?
Two things that I think are very important for Australian executives wanting to engage particularly in the tech industry with Asian counterparts. The first thing is to be able to present yourself in a very clear way, with the expectation that A, your counterpart is not super familiar with tech, and B, your counterpart may not have English as a first language. Right? Mm. So I think there are many times that I've seen people in the tech industry get very excited talking about blockchain. And John, you're one of Australia's foremost authorities on blockchain. They're talking about blockchain or talking about a particular internet protocol. And that might be very exciting, and it might be very important, and it might be very useful. But if I'm an Australian beef farmer that simply wants to enable a Chinese purchaser to verify that the meat they are buying comes from an organic Australian farm, that's the sort of language that I should be referring to. So I should be saying that, look, we create software that helps people, that gives people confidence. We tailor-make software to make sure that the buyer of meat can be assured that the meat is organic and Australian. We tailor-make software to make sure that the provider of an online educational service can reach a buyer of an online educational service. So the beginning has to be very clear, very simple. As I said, try and keep the tech out of it, and imagine and remember that you could be speaking to someone for whom English is not a first language.
I guess explaining things simply is actually a lot harder than explaining complicated things
without a language barrier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. I mean, put aside the language. No, a really good point there, John. Put aside the language. Trying to explain difficult things. I mean, frankly, when I first was looking up what you do, Ninja Software, I needed to just get my head around a little bit about what is it that Ninja Software is about? What is it that you really want to do? And that's why in my own head, I was thinking about, well, if I was going to explain Ninja Software to someone, if I was going to pitch it, how would I do that? And how would I do it in the most simple way, which doesn't involve too much technology and which would be easily appreciated by someone that, for example, doesn't speak English very well. And that's why I came up with a 2-sentence motto. Look, if you have a service, if you have a product, we tailor-make software so that your service and your product can reach customers and clients better.
It's amazing.
And from there, you can then, and so I want
I think that's better than anything I've come up with.
Right. And then you can go into your examples, right? Then you can go into talking about how you've got software which can be a database for hazardous materials in heavy industry plants and things like that. I mean, that's where you can get a little bit more.
So we've been looking into, we've toyed with the idea of expanding into the Asian markets, but our focus has always been, well, Perth first and Australia after that. Yeah. Getting the foot in the door is very hard for the Asian markets. So I've looked into, I've been traveling recently. I went to South Korea, I went to Taiwan, I went to Indonesia. I made some initial contacts there, but getting to the next level where you can actually provide services from Australia across the pond. So what's required to really get the foot in the door, in Asia?
Yeah, no, and really good point. And I think that foot in the door is where a lot of our Australian businesses struggle, because once we've got the momentum, things are a lot easier. And that's where I would go back to the issue of soft skills and developing personal relationships. That's something that is said a lot, and everybody just gets it because it's something that is thrown out. But how to practically do that, I think, is the challenge. I was saying before, one of the key things is how do we stand out? John, you've just been to South Korea, you've been to markets like Taiwan. You mentioned your friend in Singapore. The thing is, a lot of people are doing that, and there is the angel investment firm in Tokyo, or there's the tech company somewhere in Shenzhen, China, that is meeting 100 people every day. So we've taken a lot of effort and cost and time and expense and invested resources to travel around, but a lot of people are doing that. So how, to sort of quote you back, John, how do we get our foot in the door and make sure that they remember us? How do we make sure that our name card is not going in the bin, or after they scan our QR code in WeChat, they're not just deleting our contacts straight away? That's where it's important to strategize how to build a personal relationship. Not just say, oh, this is really important, and it's not something, building a personal relationship is not something that just happens. It's something that you need to strategize about. So do your research, as I was saying before, do your research on your counterpart, not just the stats and the business side of things, but try and make things more personal. What is it that you can share from a personal point of view? What is it that you can identify and have found out from the other side? Something personal about them.
It's tricky, right? Because because you really need a physical presence to make it work well enough, and a lot of the public profiles of important business owners in the Asian countries, they're not on LinkedIn. They don't use LinkedIn. They're not on Facebook. They don't use Facebook. So there's a disconnect there where they haven't entered the digital age on the Western side. They're still there on WeChat, online, and all that kind of stuff. So we need to be able to learn more about these people, about these businesses, without actually having access to this information, and also not having the physical presence as well.
Information that we're used to. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
LinkedIn.
Like when I was in Taiwan, right? No one uses LinkedIn. I was asking about it on the entrepreneurs chat, on online chat, and they were basically saying their lifelong connections are built right from childhood, and it just stays the same for the rest of their life. There's no easy way to connect with new people, and the way to do it is basically
is that common?
Mafia style.
The connections from birth. I'm not actually friends with anyone I went to primary school with, because I moved around a lot, and it just wasn't. It just hasn't ended up that way.
Sure. Well, so I think you've raised another series of really good points, and to address them one by one. John and Alex.
So we're giving you a lot to unpack.
Sure. And I think what's useful is if this can be a conversation. I think it's more interesting for a listener, for a viewer, rather than Alex asks a question and Andrew answers it. So I hope that's.
I think
we go with a more
Alex and myself,
conversational style, and
I think both Alex and myself just have to know these answers, and you seem to have a lot of opinions, and we like opinions.
Well, I actually know everything. So
excellent.
Right. I like that. If that could be just a cover point, just repeat that over and over again. Right.
Beautiful.
The first is it true that people build these lifelong connections from birth, and that a foreigner coming from Australia has no chance whatsoever of entering? Look, I think it's true that people do build connections at an earlier stage, and perhaps have a greater commitment, if that's the right word, to the social network in Asia. I think that, and following on from what Alex is saying, I don't know a lot of my, in fact, I don't know any of my friends now. I'm not in contact with any of my friends from my Australian primary school, but I remain in very close contact with many of my friends in Singapore, in Taiwan, in mainland China, and Hong Kong. That's not to say that making friends, making relationships with someone in Asia is impossible if you're coming from Australia, and I think that's something that should be strongly emphasized. Of course, it's possible to build relationships. Now, the next question is then, well, how do you do it? And you made a very good point. Look, Andrew, you're talking about doing your personal research, but they're not on LinkedIn. If you try and Google them, it's difficult, or it comes up in Japanese, or it comes up in Chinese characters. They don't even seem to respond to their email very much. I think what's important is that the tech that we use here, and that we're very comfortable and very fortunate to use here, because I think it works well. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google. That's not necessarily the tech that is very popular across Asia. And John, you made a good point. Look, Taiwan, markets like Taiwan, Thailand, they use Line a lot. And mainland China is quite well known, uses a lot of WeChat. Yep. India uses WhatsApp. And it's not just that they use these technologies as an instant messaging service, or as a blog, which is what a lot of us sort of use, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or even SMS for. If you look at the way that China uses WeChat is so integrated in society. People are booking hospital appointments. They're paying their taxes. They are having divorce mediations through WeChat. When Japan uses Line, it's not just organizing a barbecue. There are very strong commercial transactions that are happening over Line. There are legal discussions that are happening over Line. You can do both. So, for example, China and mainland China has laws to the extent of depicting to what extent WeChat communications constitute part of a contract, and Japan has similar sort of things. So it's one thing for us to say, well, they're not on LinkedIn, so how can I find out anything about them? I think an important point is to say, well, what are they using? How are they using it? In what way can I leverage that? In what way can I find out more about that? And that's actually a great opportunity for Australian executives to distinguish yourself. It's not just Australians that are finding it difficult using Line or WhatsApp or WeChat in the way that our Asian counterparts are. A lot of Western groups, a lot of Western cultures who are familiar with Gmail and Google and YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn, that's our first point of call, right? If I want to find out, the first thing I did when you asked me to do this interview, I went onto LinkedIn to find out about you.
Exactly.
And if that's what everybody's doing, and you do something else, you've just stood out.
So is there a LinkedIn equivalent? Because I don't know it, so I assume there isn't. And if there isn't, why not? Is that LinkedIn style of like online profile first not? Is that not the way things are done culturally in general. Asia's a big place, by the way. I hate saying in Asia.
It's funny, right? Yeah, because the culture changes across countries.
Yeah,
across boundaries.
It's ridiculous saying in Asia. It's kind of like saying in Europe, and there's a big difference between a German and a Spaniard, And I think it's a big difference.
There's even a big difference across Australia, right? I mean, here I am in Adelaide, you're in Perth. Melbourne is different to both of our places. Sydney is different. Queensland has different rules on relaxing the borders. So even within Australia, there's a lot of cultural difference. So of course, when you make a good point there, Alex, we're speaking about Asia as this sort of
like it's one country,
super country.
Yeah, super country. All those Asians with the Asian culture, Asian.
It's so strange, isn't it? Yeah,
eating Asian food. Yeah.
I think when people generally say I want to do business in Asia, they mean China.
East Asia.
Yeah,
it's usually South Korea, Japan, Taiwan.
I
was going to list out, but like it starts with China and kind of goes down from size and market size.
That's a really good point, and perhaps a simple point, but an important point to make right at the beginning, Alex, is when you talk about Asia, if you want to do business in Asia, I would strongly recommend focus on a particular market. You can't really plan to do business in Asia. What you want to do is find a market in mainland China, or a market in Malaysia, or in Indonesia, which is very close to Europe and Perth, because the resources and the research and the time and the tailoring that you're going to need to do to do something in Indonesia is going to be very different to what you're going to do in Malaysia or Japan. So that I think is a critical first point. You also asked then about, well, if is there a LinkedIn equivalent in Asia, and or in a particular part of Asia perhaps, and if not, why not? To be honest, I'm not familiar with a LinkedIn equivalent. Those places that would use a LinkedIn equivalent are using LinkedIn. So there is a Chinese version of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
There is a Chinese version of LinkedIn, and some Chinese executives will put their material on LinkedIn.
Often that's because they are wanting to do business with the West, right?
Precisely. And I would say that the majority of people that I have used, that I have seen using LinkedIn in mainland China tend to be a little bit younger, more tech savvy, but more at the beginning of their careers, because they're looking to partner or find an investor or find an employer who has Western connections. It is much less common in my experience to see a more established Chinese state-owned enterprise boss or the leader, senior executive of a bank have a very detailed LinkedIn profile. So that goes to the next question that you asked, Alex. Well, why? Well, why is it that LinkedIn appears to be less useful, less popular, and now I'm speaking just in mainland China? I think, look, this is speculation now.
Of course.
My sense is that LinkedIn, to use your words, has become a bit of a resume blog, right? I put down all these great things about myself and my experiences and what I've done. I have a sense that as our Chinese counterparts are looking at who they want to work with, who they want to hire, who they want to sell or buy things from, whilst looking at the past 20 years and seeing what you have done, that's nice. That's useful. I'm more interested in directly asking you, in you directly asking me questions, because anybody can put things down on a piece of paper. But if we have the opportunity, and look, it doesn't have to be face-to-face. Face-to-face is great. It would be ideal. It's also expensive. It's also difficult, and it's also impractical during a lot of this COVID-19 time. If we have the opportunity to connect via video conferencing, a telephone call, if it has to be email or text, that is more meaningful to me. And if I'm going to invest the time to find out about you, I'd rather spend half an hour talking to you than half an hour reading about your LinkedIn profile. And similarly, I don't really need to invest a lot of time putting my resume on a piece of paper until you've had a good talk with me, and I want to reveal this information. I want to share this information with you. That's my sense, because even when the Chinese executives that I work with know their counterpart has a LinkedIn profile, it's not the first thing they go to.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's different for us, isn't it?
Right, where we go straight to it. Right?
Yes.
Who have you contacted? Or who are your contacts?
Networks.
What did you do in the last 10 years? Yeah.
And I just want to see what people post, see their activity. It gives you I know it's like a highlight reel, but it gives you an insight into their mindset.
Good point though from Andrew. Is like this is information that they've decided to make available to the public, and that's what we see. But the extra effort of speaking to them directly makes a difference. And I was in Indonesia recently, like I mentioned before, and I found that a lot of business is it's very word of mouth driven. So people recommend their families, their friends, or I've used this person, they're pretty good, check them out. And it's a decentralized way of recommendations and also, I guess, reviews, where you have to talk to people and ask them, have they tried someone before? It's a different approach, and it works pretty well. It's a more personal level, I think.
No, I think you're spot on there, John. I think that sort of word of mouth is a very powerful thing. I think building on that, another reason why LinkedIn is not as popular in Asian countries, for example, mainland China, is it doesn't have that. It doesn't have the same amount of impact. It doesn't have the critical mass. It doesn't have that strong influence that it has in Australia. If I know that everybody's on LinkedIn, then I need a LinkedIn profile because I know you're going to read my LinkedIn profile.
The network effect.
If I know that actually not many people here in Shanghai or not many people in Beijing use LinkedIn or are going to read my LinkedIn profile, I'm going to use my half an hour, my 1 hour, my 3 hours in a different way, and not just A, update my profile, or B, go and look at yours. Rather, I go and talk to people or research you in a different way and join
yeah.
you.
One thing I've noticed is the opinion of IM, so WhatsApp, Telegram, all that kind of stuff, is considered a casual kind of conversation in Australia, where we just it's like texting, SMSing, or MSN back in the day, ICQ. It's always been a casual way of communicating. But what I've seen working with Lat28 that we've talked about before is that the Chinese use WeChat for everything. They use it for marketing. They use it for selling products. They use it for advertising, talking to travel companies, tour businesses. It's such a large-scale commercial thing to do now. And I think in Australia, we just don't even consider it possible to do business through instant messaging.
Yeah, no, I think that's a key. I'll speak to mainland China and WeChat, and then expand it to other countries as well. But to build on your point there, John, I think in mainland China and WeChat, you're right. WeChat is, let me say it this way: the way that we see instant messaging, to use your words there, John, it's a very casual thing. It's how you organize the barbecue on Saturday. It's to make sure that someone's picked up the kids from work, or to make sure that you buy milk. Whereas WeChat as a platform in China is a very accepted means of communicating commercially, communicating legally. And I made the reference before about how there's even apps and software to negotiate and mediate a divorce through WeChat. Pay your taxes through WeChat. Buy a car through WeChat. And the text that appears in a WeChat has legal force in certain jurisdictions and under certain laws of the People's Republic of China. So understanding that is a vehicle, is a tool that is being used in mainland China is something that I think not enough Australians know, because we still think of WeChat as, well, it's just a text
Chinese
messaging.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's Chinese, or SMS. I mean, that's not serious. The amount of money that the Chinese will invest in a WeChat channel, having 20 people, HR will commit 20 people to monitoring, updating in real time the WeChat channel, posting pictures, responding to customer service queries. That's where they're putting their money. That's where they're putting their resources, instead of, for example, in a LinkedIn profile or perhaps in a website.
Facebook, really.
Oh, Facebook, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we use similarly, we use Facebook Messenger for a lot of that stuff. Yeah,
right.
A lot of businesses run appointments through Facebook, so I think they're trying to achieve the same thing.
Yep.
But I think what WeChat's done pretty well is that there's been government interest in making sure that WeChat is used by a lot of people, and people use it because it's backed, and it means that people are more likely to use it, and also businesses are more likely to also use it for even legal things, like you said.
And a key thing about WeChat is that embedded within the software is the financial side of things. So it's completely possible and secure, that they would say secure, and I know there's a debate on that, but it's secure to make money transfers, to put your bank account details. It's extremely common to pay large sums of money via WeChat, and WeChat income is taxable, and the tax department can. So it's very much embedded in Chinese business and commerce society. When I lived there, my wife would regularly make the point, I haven't seen cash for about 6 months, because everything that we do is done over my phone. And people can quite literally buy a house through WeChat, buy a car through WeChat, which is
buy a house.
It takes Apple Pay or or whatever to a whole.
Even now, like Apple Pay is not serious. We do small transactions with it.
Well, you go to Coles, you go to Woolies, you scan your phone.
Apple Pay is just a stand-in for my card, so I don't have to carry it on me all the time.
Right.
But mortgages and cards is like another level, right?
Yeah,
but
I mean, no one's gonna pay the WTO. No one's gonna pay the ATO or do their tax returns over Google Pay or Apple Pay or those sort of things.
Is that just a level of trust that the people have with the products?
I think trust is part of it. I think convenience is part of it. I think it's now so pervasive. Look, I'll be honest. When I first got used to the platform, I was very reluctant. I had all the concerns that you often hear. I was worried about privacy.
Yes.
The GPS tracker. I don't want the government to know where I am. I don't want them to know my bank account details. And these things, I suppose, ultimately, I had to weigh up the convenience and the use of WeChat versus the other things. And
it's the individualist versus collectivist.
And look, here's one crazy story. I used to live in Shanghai. I used to live in Beijing first. I used to live in Shanghai. There was a beggar on the street in Shanghai that wouldn't take cash. And he would only take a WeChat transfer.
Wow.
And I was thinking, look, this is just bonkers, right? I mean, come on. What's up? This is... But once I sort of delved a little bit more deep into it, it sort of explains the whole sort of ecosystem a bit more. So as a beggar, he did not have enough money to properly open a bank account at a bank. So he could, if you gave him $1, that he couldn't deposit it into his account. He couldn't send that dollar to his ailing daughter in a remote village. But mobile phones are so cheap, smartphones are so cheap, and internet is so cheap in mainland China that it was possible for him to get a mobile phone. A WeChat account is free. Setting up your WeChat account is free. You can do it as long as you don't need to go to a bank. So he set up a WeChat account, and if you wanted to give him $1, he said, look, can you just send the dollar to me in WeChat, and then I can use that money to send to my family. And because that was a lot more useful to him than cash. And once I understood that, I had a different perspective on this beggar. But B, it really struck me how embedded WeChat has become, how embedded technology has become to Chinese society, where a non-educated, and this person could hardly speak Chinese, let alone speak English. He certainly couldn't read or write, but he had enough ability to type things into a phone and to develop a WeChat account, and he could send money 1,000 miles across China to a relative. That's the level of tech. That's the level of integration that tech has into the Chinese society, and I suppose that does move me to another related point when it comes to tech in China. I don't want this to only be about China as well, so absolutely feel free to ask me about things outside of mainland China. But with regards to China and tech, another issue that very frequently comes up is the issue of IP. I mean, you don't want to do business with China because they're going to steal our IP and they're copycats and they're pirates.
Exactly.
I think, look, it is an issue, or perhaps I would say, I absolutely believe it was an issue. And I absolutely believe that there have been issues of industrial espionage in which a Chinese entity stole something from an Australian entity. That I'm sure that's happened. I can't point to one, but I just know it's happened somewhere.
Of course it has, yeah.
I suspect an Australian entity may have done something against another entity as well. But the point is, I know it's happened. What I would say now, though, is that the level of tech in China has grown so rapidly, and particularly when you go to places like Shenzhen, like Shanghai, where the tech is really very, very strong.
Prevalent.
I've heard some Chinese tech people say, of course we need to protect IP. Of course we need to enforce IP rights and IP laws, because our IP is the best right now. There's nothing for us to copy from other people. Other people are now copying us. And I think that's an important, to what extent that's true, I'm still not 100% sure, but I know to some extent that is true. Right? And it's a mistake for us to look at China and say, well, there are a bunch of copycats that are just trying to do things we do but cheaper. Because I think very quickly those days have passed, and the level of sophistication and integration that tech has into Chinese society is quite would be very, very surprising to a lot of Australians.
Absolutely, I think most Australians have no clue what's going on over there.
It used to be the case, wasn't it?
Not just around technology.
But the whole copycat thing, it used to be true. But if you look at all the articles and what China's doing today, it's pretty cutting edge. It's world leading, and people don't realize that. I think a lot of people don't, and it's something that we should be aware of, especially since this podcast is about doing business with China, with the Asian countries, and it's easy to not notice, but a lot of big things are happening over there, and industry leading stuff that we should really be a part of as well.
Yeah, and I think that applies across a whole range of different areas. The infrastructure and the technology that they have around esports, that they have around financial security, and how they can embed particular protocols in video conferencing software so that you cannot just Zoom bomb someone. And the related infrastructure that goes with that. So I mentioned esports, but the laws around hosting an esport event, the catering, how are people building stadiums for esports? South Korea, Japan, Singapore, mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they're really on top of that. And I was surprised. Catering for an esports event, commercial arbitration of esports disputes. These are things that we haven't really given a lot of thought to.
It's like we don't take it seriously,
Yeah, it's a bunch of guys playing Warcraft. I mean, seriously, how hard can it be?
I went to a StarCraft tournament in South Korea. It was epic. It was huge.
Yeah.
I think the United States is now. I mean, I saw that like the Fortnite World Championships or something, and it's like $1 million prize.
I think you still think of kids playing Fortnite though. That's the
right.
thing.
Oh, they were all still kids, but they would, because
no
one else could
Fortnite,
beat them. Yeah.
It's StarCraft 2, it's Magic the Gathering, these sort of things, and these are just the titles that there are English words to and that we're very familiar with, but relatively familiar with in Australia. There's a whole bunch of MMP, MMR,
MMORPG,
MMORPGs coming out of markets like Taiwan, Hong Kong, mainland China, Singapore, which, they're all in Chinese or they're all in Japanese.
Or so they're completely localized as well.
They're completely localized. They're making heaps of money. They have absolutely ridiculously huge user bases, and we've never heard of them here. So I think all that's to say, certainly there are things that we can teach Asia, that we can bring to Asia, that we can sell to Asia, because our tech is fantastic, right? I mean, we've got very, very clever people like yourselves, John and Alex. We've got scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs, innovators. Asia has them as well. And it's not, I think it would be a mistake to think that, well, maybe, to forget about the fact that maybe we could be buying stuff from them. Maybe we could be, quote unquote, learning, copying, adapting things that are happening over there to make it suit an Australian market, an Australian consumer. It can't just be, and it shouldn't just be one way. And if we think about it in a one way process only, we're giving up a lot of opportunities.
So here's a question: do you think WeChat, as it stands in mainland China, could actually work here, or is it that tight coupling of a organization with the government and also I think the trust? Facebook, I'm sure, is trying to become WeChat for the West, and I think it will fail. And I don't ever want to use Facebook Pay or use Facebook to negotiate business, or essentially use Facebook for anything other than advertising. I have zero trust in Facebook or its leadership or its ethics. So could something like WeChat even work here? Is WeChat in mainland China a sign of things to come here, or is it a cultural anomaly? Yeah.
No, that's look, if I could really answer that definitively, I'd be at the casino right now. And
of course, I'm asking for your opinion.
Yeah. So I mean, I suppose two things come to mind as you ask the question. So first, of course, is that WeChat is usable outside of mainland China. And lots and lots of people are using WeChat right now. I've got a WeChat account.
Yeah, we're on WeChat.
Yeah, and so
it's very hard to get an account.
Right, number one, that's right. So then technically it's harder to register your account if you're outside of mainland China. And secondly, a lot of the functionality doesn't apply when you're out of mainland China, and it effectively becomes a blog, an instant messenger,
WhatsApp, basically,
and Zoom.
Yeah.
So then the question is, well, is it possible that WeChat money transfers and such deep integration in society is possible in Australia, in America? I think it will be more and more society is going to become accepting of tech. I mean, if we look at what we accept now in terms of, frankly, the privacy issues that we're seemingly happy to give up, because when we use our GPS, when we send an email, I use Gmail. When I write an email on Gmail about Harvard University, I'll get 10 ads on Harvard University popping up because there's an algorithm that looks at my email and says, this is what you're interested in. Similarly, Facebook will tell me, this is what you should read. LinkedIn refers me to, these are the things that your friends are talking about. If I'm on GPS and I go past a particular place, then I'll get a bunch of ads saying, you've just been here, or would you like to review this on TripAdvisor because you've just been there? So, if you asked people 50 years ago, would you be happy if a computer could do that and knew that about you? I think 99.9% of Australians would say no. But we've accepted that now as convenience, because I like to use TripAdvisor. I like to use Google Maps. I think Facebook is wonderful. So if the question is, will there be an increasing amount of tech integration into Australian society? I think the answer absolutely is yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will it be WeChat that does it? That I think, frankly, no. I don't think it'll be WeChat that does it.
It's the centralization of it. Like, it's all one single point, isn't it?
I think that's right. So there's good and bad about that, right? I think the good thing is that so much is centralized with WeChat that you can do almost everything from the app. You don't need to leave the app, right? You can text your girlfriend. You can book dinner. You can pay your taxes. You can organize your school fees for your son, all with the one app, and you just need one password.
How convenient is incredible.
How convenient is that? The downside is, of course, someone hacks your WeChat account and your life is over.
Oh, sure.
And then, of course, there's the issue of privacy. Look, is it a private company? How much data do I want to give to that one company? Is that company in some way connected to the government? I don't want my government to know that much about me. I think in Western countries, in Australia, we have a lower level of tolerance for government oversight. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, and there's a long debate as to what can be had for.
Yeah, that's a whole another podcast episode.
Yeah,
But
I think just in Australia, we feel uncomfortable if once I have outwardly said, Facebook knows where I've been, then everybody goes, oh yeah, I didn't know that. How horrible. Or Yahoo had a breach of their data. It's that's terrible. I think the reaction in Asian countries is that's uncomfortable, but I'll deal with it, and it's okay for the for the bigger picture, for the convenience, for society. So I think tech integration in that sense, A, will not be WeChat, and B, will probably be slower in Western countries.
Definitely. Yeah. So this last question from me, I suppose. The stuff you said about the entering the market, targeting a specific market in a specific country, and being focused, right? So once you enter these kind of markets, how do you really differentiate yourself from all the competitors that can offer the same kind of service that are already based in that country and already speak the same language? As an Australian business, how do you set yourself apart?
If you're going into a new market offering something which is identical to your competitors, that's almost impossible.
Let's say maybe just don't.
So, I don't think the answer is, don't set yourself up as we do everything that everybody else is already doing. We just do it more expensive. that obviously is setting yourself up to fail. That there are things that we have that make us different, right? Now, and I wouldn't underestimate the positive. I don't want to underestimate or overestimate the positive image and reputation that Australia has. If you ask, and I've done this quite a lot, if you go across Asia and ask people, what do you think about Australians? Tell me about the good things that you think about Australians. You'll get quite a pleasing set of answers. We're clean, we're green, we're transparent, we've got rule of law, we're clever, we're innovative, and we're a great place to live. Those are all very, very positive things that we can leverage. It's also important, and we like that, we nod at that and say, yeah, of course that's us. Right? I think it's also important to know that there are some negative stereotypes out there about us. And when we walk into a room, we're carrying a lot of invisible baggage that, through no fault of our own, people in Asia think about us. And in terms of the negative stuff about us, right? We're racist, we're lazy, we are against foreign investment, our government is particularly anti-Asian, our government prefers Western countries and in particular the United States over us. So the extent to which an individual business person in Asia believes all of those or holds those stereotypes. I don't know, of course, right? There's differences, there's a wide variety. But those are some commonly held stereotypes. And it's important for us to reinforce all the positive things about us, and that can be a distinguishing factor. You know, our tech might look similar to other people, but because we're Australian, our quality is higher, right? We've done more testing. We are more connected to the legal backing behind our institutions stronger, something along those lines. And we also need to acknowledge and overcome any negative stereotypes that might exist. Frankly, I very much dislike the Australian stereotype that we're lazy. It's very rare that I have found a successful Australian executive and a lazy Australian business person. Right? Yeah. But if we're doing stuff in Asia, it's probably because we're absolutely not lazy. We're go-getters. So overcoming issues of stereotypes and biases like racism, of laziness, of self-entitlement. You know, in Australia, you wake up in the morning and there's gold on the street. Particularly in Western Australia, where all you do is mine, right? There's no possible technology innovation that could come out of Perth because all you do is walk along the ground and then, oh, look, an oil field.
I would say people in Australia hold that
right,
bias.
Right.
Yeah. All the states believe that too.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, as we're doing our pitch, right at the beginning, I talked about how do we pitch ourselves, keep it simple, think about notes that don't focus too much on tech, think about someone who is not English first language. Also think about the stereotypes and biases that you want to reinforce or actively reject. I think that's going to be important.
That was really good. So final question. I like to end on a fun question. So just a really easy one. Now that you're...
Now you've set this up pretty high. I'm expecting a real softball now.
It is a real softball. So now that you've been, home, locked in your home and locked in South Australia, and you've not been able to travel as much as I'm sure you were intending on, what do you miss the most? What's the thing you wake up and you're like, I can't wait to get back to this country and try eat this thing?
Okay.
Real softball, real softball.
You know what? I appreciate that. That's it's a question that's asked with much levity and casualness. Can I answer it actually in quite a serious way?
Of course, please do.
Because I've actually been giving some thought to that, Alex. I think what COVID-19 has done in terms of keeping me quite isolated, and therefore the majority, if not all, my communication is now digital. It's by emails, it's by posting, it's online comments. And I think when you are behind a screen, I think people can be more abrupt in how they respond to things that you're saying, particularly by email. I think it's been many, many decades that I have felt racial prejudice in Australia. It's been, when I was born, we were just coming out of the White Australia policy. I think you can change a policy. It takes a bit of time to change society. So whilst I don't agree, I can understand that perceptions of Chinese people, or people that look the way I look, there was a particular perception, and there were things that were said to me that I didn't really like. But I think Australian society has changed a lot, and sort of racial harmony, if you want for a better word, has been very, very good in Australia. I think I've seen the re-emergence of prejudice, of racial prejudice to me, which I think is unfortunate. And I think there's both a rise in outwardly blatant racism in Australia, but also there is a rise in overzealous nationalism in China, and probably other countries, maybe the United States.
Yep.
I think I'm very proud about being an Australian-born Chinese person. I get to celebrate my birthday twice a year. I get to celebrate New Year's twice a year. I play Aussie sports. I write Chinese characters. It's important that my whole family is multilingual. And I think it's very possible to love Australia and love China. And I think what's happened, particularly given COVID-19 and the current Australia-China relationship, is that when I say something positive about the Chinese government, I would have people say, well, you're not a true Australian, you're a Communist Party apologist. And when I say something,
of course,
if I say something, positive about Australia or critical about China, then I would have some Chinese people who, educated, well-traveled, speak 3 languages, all that sort of stuff. They would say, well, you're now showing your true colors as a banana, right? You're yellow on the outside, but actually you're white on the inside. And it seems that seeking thoughtful discussion is almost, an admission of treason. And I think that's really unfortunate, because more and more problems are not going to stop at borders, whether it's disease, whether it's, whatever. What is going to be required is people and institutions that are fluid and internally multicultural. It's going to be important to recognize problems in one's own culture, in one's own country, and I think a good global citizen is someone that can criticize and praise where it is due. A good society and a good government is one that can accept criticism and praise where it is due. And that's a long way, and I'll end here, to say I think it's unfortunate that a rise in racism and zealous nationalism has been something I've seen, and I'm getting a lot more words on that than I had been used to.
It is definitely a worrying trend after COVID-19 and the divides that are becoming even further and further apart. I mean, you just have to look at the United States ripping themselves apart, the posturing between nations and China, and from my perspective, it all is rather meaningless is not the word, just destructive, and it's not going to achieve anything good, which should be our goal as a society, as a person, as a company. Achieving positive outcomes should be the goal. Nationalism and racism and fear and ignorance are quite the opposite of that.
Gentlemen, I have tremendously enjoyed this time sharing with you, and I'm not going to leave us on a downer. I sort of.
Oh no!
As I was speaking, I was thinking, man, should I talk about something like kittens or something right now? So may I end by just speaking to what I hope Ninja Software can achieve, because as I was doing more and more research, after a while I stopped doing research as preparation for this interview, and I did research about you because I'm really interested in what you're doing. Everything from how your name changed from Ninja Dojo to Ninja Software and why you changed that, to Alex looking at an increasing amount of facial hair that you have in photos, and John, what is said about you and blockchain and your knowledge about blockchain, I think is incredible. So I think, look, the challenges of doing business right now are difficult, and then I can imagine that the time and effort and energy invested in your ride sharing platform, there must have been frustration as all this was happening.
There's a lot of projects we have paused that make me really sad that we've paused them. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I only know like 10% of the stuff that you're doing, and I feel sad. Right. But I really want to, this is not an interview that I'm just doing and, okay, done. I hope that you'll keep me updated. You'll let me know how much coffee you're drinking. I'll get to see Lan on a screen one day, because what you're doing is amazing. And I've been to Perth multiple times to deliver trainings. I'm frustrated that I didn't take the opportunity to meet you and drink tea with you.
How much is beer?
No, well, I don't even drink alcohol. I know it's pretty weird, but I know. So look, I want to know more about what you're doing, and I'm really looking forward to reading the success story that you're writing.
I look forward to reading it too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Alex,
on that note, we are actually now tracking tea drinking, so the tea stats will be on the new page. So that's something to look forward to.
New feature.
Yeah.
There we go. Ninja Software 2.0 beta is rolling out.
It's about 5 or 6 teas versus 4,000 coffees.
The tracking started a lot later, but the intent is there. So
yeah, for sure.
It's really, really, really good to meet you properly, Andrew. And I'd look forward to meeting you in person. I look forward to the travel boundaries going away anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be great to actually sit down and have a tea. I may have a chai, if that's okay.
I'll let you drink coffee. And John can have his beer.
Exactly. It's been a long time since I've been to Adelaide too. So one day maybe I'll head over to Adelaide again.
I look forward to seeing you here. You guys have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you then.
And that concludes another episode of Tech Society. We learned a lot from this one, and we hope you did too. Let us know what you thought over at techsociety.fm. If you have already been thinking about expansion into Asian markets, or have already succeeded, we'd love to hear from you. You can tweet us at Tech Society. Tech Society is sponsored by Ninja Software.